Hi, this is Billy Tarasio with the Modern Divorce Podcast with a very special guest for this episode, Dr. Elia. Oh, I should have asked how to spell your name. Or how to say your name. It's actually Dr. Happy, and I'll let you tell us how to pronounce your name.
Actually, the last name is Gougouris, and it's not that hard. If you see it spelled out, it's Gour twice, Gougouris, and is at the end. So it's not as hard as it looks.
It's true. That's
Yes,
true.
yes.
Gougouris.
There you go. There it is.
Oh,
That's it.
but you are Dr. Happy, right?
Well, I'm the happiness doctor. I don't know if that's the same, but yes, I
You
am
are a
indeed.
happiness doctor.
I am.
You have written books. You are a national speaker. You work with corporations. And your work and your premise is that happiness is a choice.
Yes, no, but not only that, but happiness is also a skill set, meaning
Ah,
that certain people may have a certain predisposition to have a happier nature, if you will. Like, I was I've been born this way, right? But I think there's also certain skills that if people do them consistently, I guarantee that they will find happiness in their lives.
guarantee. That's a big
I
word.
know, I know but you have to remember that I have like 35 years of experience where we're working with tens of thousands of people across the globe, and that's the United States. And over time, you begin to see that there are certain specific things, which is the reason why I wrote my first book, Seven Paths to Lasting Happiness. We had a big debate whether the book should be Seven Paths to Happiness. And that sounded more like pop psychology, an easier title. But I insisted, I said, no, I don't want some superficial. I'm talking about lasting happiness, transformative happiness, where people really create a life and create relationships that are happy, uplifting, positive, and fulfilling. And it's
Ah,
definitely doable, but you got to do the work.
sure. Sure. Okay. So I'm beginning to understand, I think, although I'm making all sorts of leaps in my head. Um, but I'm so happy that you're here because our audience, the people who are listening, are either thinking about divorce, going through divorce, or coming out of divorce. And that is not a happy time.
Not at all.
No one who gets divorced is happy about it. It's a very, very stressful time. Then you're dealing with being alone for the first time or single parent for the first time, trying to figure out how to rebuild your life after that. And so when people are going through that type of trauma, I'd love to get some practical tips on what they can do to help themselves be happier.
And just so the audience knows, I spent the first half of my career as a clinical psychologist in private practice. So I did a lot of marriage counseling and a lot of marriage coaching and divorce coaching too. And then, when I switched over more on the coaching side, I help people that have exited the divorce uh, period, which it can be sometimes years,
Yes.
right? Sometimes months, but sometimes years. A traumatic and devastating and emotionally and physically and mentally draining, right? I help them afterwards. How do you create your best year yet post divorce? Where empowering them, and I take them through this process basically, where they very mindfully and consciously decide what kind of life they want to live. Some people do that very for the first time in their life, like they've never really consciously and mindfully designed, what kind of life do I want to live? And it's very rewarding. It's very exciting because people feel like like I this relationship I invested so much time, money, energy, love, commitment, so on, and what was it for, right?
Right.
So they're at a very low point in their lives. But for them to see, not only is there a path forward, but there's a path forward that you can create a life so much better than you've ever imagined, right? And that's very exciting. And that's what I do. It's one of my, like, yes, I get paid for what I do, but I love seeing people kind of like uh, tentatively and almost fearfully. It's like, is this for real? Can I really have a great life? Can I live happily? Can I have relationships that are deep and connected and heart-centered and so on? And once they begin to see that that's possible, to me, I can't tell you what a pleasure it is just to take them on this journey, basically,
Well,
and creating their best life yet. Actually, it only takes like an hour and a half. We're not talking about like months and weeks. Like my process, I got it down pat so quickly that I can in 90 minutes from now when we start, you will have created the framework for your best life ever and be your best year ever.
wow. Okay, well, okay, I have so many thoughts. You are clearly doing that which brings you joy and
Absolutely.
meaning, and that which you as a individual have been designed to do. And that, of course, is contagious and uplifting. And you're also delivering people hope that maybe they didn't have prior to working with you. In our short time together, what can people do if they can't do the 90 minutes with you? What are some small steps people could do to design their happier life?
I want to share with you that that successful slash happy people have the same human frailties, the same weaknesses, the same disappointments, like everybody else has, except that they do three things differently and they do them consistently. So the first of those is they take personal responsibility for their lives, meaning this is on me. Nobody put a gun to my head to do this. I chose this, right? So they're personally responsible. Number two, they learn from them, the mistakes or the setbacks and so on, their disappointments. They learn from them. And like Nelson Mandela said, either you win or you learn in life. There's no losing, right? Which
Yeah.
I love that. It's like, and number three, which I personally think number three is even actually more important than personal responsibility and learning in lessons learned, is they have the ability to let them go. Meaning that if something happened last year, I'm not carrying it into this year. Or something happened for the last 20 years in my marriage, right? I'm not going to carry it into my future. If something happened last month, I'm not carrying it into this month, or last week into this week, or for the extra credit. If something happened yesterday, I'm not carrying it into today. Far too many people, Billy, wake up every morning before they brush their teeth, before they go to work, before they put makeup on, before they do anything, and put on a backpack that has 100 pounds worth of rocks. And those rocks, of course, are symbolic, from the little pebbles
Yeah.
to the rocks to the boulders, right, of life. And they walk through life burdened
Yeah.
by their past and their past choices and so on. So my my focus is you can't do anything about the past other than learn from it, take responsibility and let it go. But your future is determined by the choices you make today, right? Is that not true?
Absolutely.
What I choose today would determine my tomorrow.
Absolutely.
And that's where the focus, so that's the shift of focus, right? So what do happy people have? We can just go through the seven paths fairly quickly, but number one is they practice self-care or
Mm.
self-love. And I created basically a personal health assessment, 20 questions that looks at the four different areas of our lives: physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. It takes 2 minutes. Even though I created this assessment, I take it myself on the first of every month.
Oh, really?
Like this? Oh, absolutely. Because
Mm-hmm.
it's a live document. It's basically like taking my pulse and
Sure.
seeing how am I doing right now?
Right.
And what areas do I need to focus on?
Mm-hmm.
It's on a scale of 1 through 5. 5, I'm doing great. 4 is I'm doing really good. 3, sometimes, 1 and 2, I'm never do it or rarely do it. So I say, if you score yourself in any one of those questions, a 4 or 5, pat yourself on the back and acknowledge that you're really doing well in this area. If you score a 3, 3 is not a bad score. It means I do it sometimes, but there's certainly room for improvement. However, if I score anywhere myself a 1 or a 2, now those are red flags
Right.
because those will definitely take away from your happiness and wellness and your health even. And so we kind of, coach people based on that. And I can give that PDF to you too, make it available to your, I mean, it's free. People have used it all over the world, including self-care for healthcare. I've had physicians who not only are using that for their patients, how you go into a doctor's office and, do you have
Yeah.
diabetes, all that stuff. This is a little different
Yeah.
of an intake form,
Mm-hmm.
but they're using it for themselves
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because of how stressed the last year and a half has been for them across, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that gives you at least what areas do I need to focus on? Maybe physically I'm doing really well, but emotionally and mentally, struggling a little bit, right? So Aristotle said that happiness is the whole meaning and purpose of life, the
Mm.
whole aim and end of human existence. Think about that statement.
Mm-hmm.
So, isn't this what we're here on this earth? I speak to audiences across the globe, and I always start with the following questions. if you were to ask any parent regarding of nationality, ethnicity, religious affiliation, socioeconomic status, gender, whatever, what would you like for your children? What's the answer to that question? I just want them to be, and
Yeah.
then I take the microphone and I point at the audience and happy, right? So this is a universal need. And my biggest, I guess, uh, lesson learned or takeaway from the last 18 months during this pandemic, with all the other problems that it caused, the financial crisis, the mental health crisis, and so on, is this: do not procrastinate your happiness.
Mm,
Meaning, don't wait for when,
mm,
even don't wait for when the divorce is over,
mhm.
or when the kids leave, for college, or when they get married, or when I get this raise, or when I'm in a healthy relationship, or when I'm finally done with this divorce. No, forget all the whens, because the truth of the matter is, none of us know if we're going to be here next month.
Right.
There are no guarantees in life. This has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt for the last 18 months. So practice your best life now, right? And part of that comes from self-care. That's number one. The second thing, of course, is gratitude. We know that physiologically, one cannot be in a grateful space in their mind and be depressed at the same time. That's not physiologically possible. So
Wow.
if I'm in a grateful place, I'm in a happy place.
Wow.
Now, it's easy to be grateful when things are going well in life. That's the easiest thing in the world. I can do my top 3 gratitude, every day for 365 days and not repeat myself. The question, of course, is, can we be grateful in the midst of adversity?
Mm.
Because I feel like you and I included, like, we're all graduates from the University of Adversity, all of us. And the older we get, the older we get, the more PhDs we have, right? When we're young, we probably have elementary school education in adversity. You get older, inevitably relationships are going to fail.
Right.
You got a kid that's going to go astray, perhaps. You're going to have to take care of an elderly parent who's dying from Alzheimer's. You're going to have, health issues and financial issues and so on in relationships. So is it possible? So that's the question of the audience. I'm convinced that it is possible to be grateful in the midst of adversity if you do those things that we talked about before. Own it
Mm-hmm.
and learn from it, and that they have the ability to let it go. Now, the third path, of course, is, how do you let it go? Because that's easier said than done. It sounds great when you say it, but can people truly let go of things and forgive themselves? My experience is that self-forgiveness is the ultimate act of self-compassion. Because I know, again, I've worked with so many people in my private practice. I would say 70% of were women. They could forgive everybody else. They didn't forgive themselves.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, self-forgiveness is key to one's happiness, because that's the way we let go of things. And so the question is, how do you forgive yourself, right? I mean, like, practically, I mean, that sounds great in theory, but what's the practical, how do you do that?
Right.
So I take people through this process. I'm like, okay, let's talk about all the things you haven't forgiven yourself for. Write them in bullet points. Start writing things down. It could be 20 things, 10 things, 100. I don't care. When you're done, I want you to assign a number next to them. 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest. So 1 would be, I spilled milk on my nice shirt yesterday. I'm so embarrassed. I did it at the restaurant, right? That's a 1. That's a silly thing, right?
Right.
Then 10 would be, perhaps even what happened with the divorce, right? It's on the 9. I mean, this is a big thing that I need to forgive myself for choices that I made and so on. That's high up. And then once you number each one of these things, let us begin with the easy ones. Let's begin with the 1s and the 2s and the 3s,
Sure.
and gain some practice,
Yeah.
and gain some momentum. And, and then we move on to the tougher things as I take them through this process. What's fascinating, Billy, is people that are type A personalities, because I work a lot with C-suite.
Mm-hmm.
When I've taken through this process, they push back. They're like, that's not how I'm going to do it. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, I'm going to start with a 10.
Sure.
I'm like, why would you start with a 10?
Right.
But that's how they're driven, because their mind works. They're like, because if I can forgive myself at a 10, everything else is easier after that.
Right.
So personally, I could care less which way people go, as long as they do it.
Sure.
It doesn't matter to me, as long as whatever works best for you. So
Mm-hmm.
so forgiveness and self-forgiveness is huge, right? The other thing, of course, is people that know what their purpose in life is and live it tend to be happier. I was fortunate enough to learn my purpose very early on in my life, which is, I just want to make a difference. in people's lives, and as I, gotten older in organizations' lives and so on, like making a difference that's what makes me the happiest.
Yeah.
And I've been fortunate that I've lived it for 35 years, so that's part of my job, right? So, but in order for you to find out what your purpose in life is you got to get quiet.
Mm-hmm.
Like you really have to get quiet, and I would say I call that listen
Mm-hmm.
to that still small voice inside. Some people call it my intuition
Mm-hmm.
or my higher self.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a spiritual person, you can say, well, that's the spirit of God, my connection to divinity. I don't really care what you call it,
Mm-hmm.
but get quiet enough and listen to it. This is one of the few absolutes in life for me personally, because very few things are truly absolute. Every time that I've heard that voice and acted on it, it has always worked out. But I'm not a perfect human being, so I hear that voice a lot on a daily basis. Sometimes I hear it and then I ignore it, right? And when that
Okay.
happens, I always pay the price for that.
How
When that's
does
happened,
someone know when they're hearing that and when they're hearing their own demons, self-doubt?
because it sounds very different. The downloads that you get are insightful. There's wisdom, and that's why I say whether
Mm.
it comes from your intuition or your higher self or God or whatever, it's a very different voice than the inner critic.
Ah,
If you hear the inner critic, that's not that.
yeah.
If you hear that you should do anything that starts with you should, that's not what I'm talking about.
Okay.
That's a very, very different voice. One of them, it comes with love and compassion and self-compassion and kindness, all those elements in inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
Because oftentimes I've come up with stuff that I would never think that. I don't think that way. Like that's not something that I would normally think or go down that path. That's different. And I have to examine it and say, is this really true for me and so on, right?
Yeah.
The other side, of course, is it hammers you. And of
Yeah.
course, that undermines your self-worth. I mean, all those self-defeating thoughts lead to self-destructive behaviors,
Mm-hmm.
which of course starts the cycle again because it fuels the inner critic. Every time we mess up, the inner critic goes, great, boom, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah,
More the same.
very different voices.
Okay.
So the other thing, of course, for me, I think, feeding your spiritual self.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it doesn't have to be not in a religious sense, but, meditate, practice mindfulness, pray if that's, but connect with that higher something, I think that's a big part, at least for my personal life, it has been. Um, the other thing, so we've got through 4 or 5 paths. The sixth path has to do with relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know this because you're on the front lines of this. I don't care how much self-care you do, self-forgiveness, gratitude, purpose, and all that stuff. If you surround yourself with toxic people and you're in toxic relationships, it's very hard to be happy. I say that even for myself. I'm telling you, I don't care how much I try to do for myself. If I'm surrounded by toxicity, that erodes and undermines all the hard work that I'm trying to do, right? So when it comes to relationship, in 2005, I made a conscious choice to eliminate any toxic relationships from my life. Now, that may sound like a bold statement, but I don't have any toxic people in my life, and I haven't had for years. And
Okay.
people say, well, Dr. Elia, how can you say stuff like that? I'm like, well, there's a specific way that I've done that. Billy, if I treat you with love, kindness, and respect, I have every right to expect that you will treat me with love, kindness, and respect in return. And that's the equalizer when it comes to relationships. Now, that of course assumes that I show up that way. In other
Right.
words, I can't be a jerk to you and then expect you to treat me with love, kindness, and respect. That's not even fair.
Okay. So
So,
can we stop here for a minute?
yeah.
Because many of our listeners are going to be wondering, how do I know if the relationships I have are toxic? And I think maybe you just answered that question, but how can someone evaluate the relationships that they're in and determine if they're toxic or not?
Have you ever gone out to lunch with somebody and when the lunch is over, you're walking back to your car and you're like, man, I really miss that person. It was so good spending time with them. You ever
Yes,
had that feeling?
of course.
Not toxic. That's like, okay. On the flip side, have you ever had an interaction with somebody and then when you walk away, I'm like, good riddance. Like, I can't stand, it.
Yes.
Do you feel better after the interaction, or worse about yourself as a result of that interaction. That's a huge clue, right? I'm not talking about, we're human beings in relationships. We'll have our, we get into it. I've been married for 30 years to my best friend, which, from time to time, we'll still get into it. But in the end, I know beyond a reasonable doubt that even if she has a difference of opinion than I do, she loves me and she really wants what's best for me. Not so much. There's a big difference between loving somebody and trying to control someone,
Mm-hmm.
right? Control is not love,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Right.
control to me is one of the most toxic things in relationships, and people try to do that with one another all the time,
Yeah.
right? If somebody puts the obvious stuff, of course, is, if they're abusive in any form, sexually, physically, emotionally, verbally, I mean, obviously that's toxic. I'm not even talking about that stuff. I'm talking about even the more subtle nuances in relationships. Are they kind of passive aggressive? Do they undermine me, or do they celebrate my successes? Like if my wife does something great, how does that take away from my self-esteem? I'm happy for
It
her. It's
shouldn't.
great. Like, congratulations. I'm on the sideline, like, go girl, basically. How does that diminish me? It doesn't, right?
Right. Right.
But insecure people are threatened by somebody else's success. Rather than celebrate it, they try to bring them down a notch or two. Well, that's toxic. That's not loving. That's not healthy,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's going to be people listening who are thinking about their friendships and thinking about their relationships that they've invested years in, their best friends, their close confidants, maybe people they work with, maybe their spouse or boyfriend, and they're thinking, this person is so negative. I always feel so bad after I talk to them. I can't eliminate those relationships.
Of course you can. I'm talking about eliminating the toxic aspect of not necessarily not necessarily the person, but those, and that's done through healthy boundaries.
Okay.
And the healthy boundaries, but you have to show up loving, kind, and respectful first to yourself. Otherwise, you can't. It then doesn't work.
Okay.
If you're also toxic towards them and they're toxic towards you, well, then you deserve one another. I mean, you know what I'm saying, though?
I
Seriously,
do. I do.
I don't deserve somebody treating me toxic with toxicity because I don't show up that way in my relationships.
Okay, so how does one set boundaries with people they care about who bring toxic elements to the relationship?
Great question. The first has to do with awareness because nothing changes until people are aware. So part of it is an educational aspect, right? And this is what I call this hot communication with people, and hot stands for honest, open, and transparent.
Okay.
We have to start practicing hot communication with people that we care about and we love.
Okay.
And so speak from your heart, do it from a place of love, but speak your truth with a capital T.
Okay.
So what is the truth, for example? The truth is that it seems like every time we get together, when I walk away from that, I feel worse than I did before. Are you aware of that? Well, why do you say that? I didn't say anything to you. Well, you know what? You throw daggers here and there. I'm not talking about the obvious abusive stuff because that's so easy I mean, those boundaries need to be both legal and otherwise, right?
Right.
I'm talking about the stuff that is not quite as easy to see. And I want to have a different relationship with you. So, my goal is from this point forward to treat you every time we interact with love, kindness, and respect, either we're physically or over the phone or through text and so on. But as I do that towards you, guess what? I'm going to expect you to do the same thing in return. And if you don't do it, I'm going to call you out on it. And those are my boundaries. And I'm not angry. I'm not saying this because I'm angry. I'm just setting the stage. This is the kind of relationship I want to have with you because I do want to have a relationship because I love you. However, if you're not able to do that in return, then we're going to be spending less and less time together. And at some point, we're going to not spend any time together because I no longer want to have toxic people in my life.
Okay. So this is like mind-blowingly simple and life-changing at the same time, which is always the best truth, right? Truth is those things. Simple, like it resonates, it's true, and it's also like it changes absolutely everything.
And it did change. I'm telling you, for 15, 16 years, I don't have any toxic people in my life. And when they get close, I have a heart-to-heart conversation with them. And most people are shocked, like, what do you mean? But then when I explain to them, And because I love them, they love me. It's like, well, I had a family member, by the way, recently, who said to me, well, I don't want to be the only toxic person in your life. I didn't know I came across that way. I don't want to be that way. And to his credit, he has changed.
Wow.
And everybody else has noticed that about him, which is great, actually. And I'm delighted because I feel like I have this person back in my life again.
Yeah.
They just needed to be, look in the mirror a little bit. Like, look, this is how you come across. And not just me, but to other people too. Other people may be okay with it. I'm not. So if you want to have a relationship with me, and I hope you do, because we used to, then you got toxic, then we got to go back to the non-toxic. And to his credit, he's done it. And I'm so grateful to him too, for doing the work. But I had to have the hot conversation with him.
So this is going to be most divorced people who have children have to have a relationship with their ex.
Yes.
The relationship is definitively toxic at times.
But it doesn't have to be, as you know, because I also know couples that have been divorced that not only are they're divorced, they're with their new spouses or boyfriends, girlfriends, and they all vacation together with all their blended family kids. And it's lovely. That's also doable.
Yeah. Oh no, I lost your volume.
No, it is doable. No. I'm sorry.
Oh, there you are. You're back.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Something happened to the connectivity here. So what I was saying is, I have seen it personally that people can vacation together with their exes and their significant others and all their kids and have a wonderful time. It's doable.
It's doable. Okay. Well, most of us are going to have to start a little smaller than that.
No, but you also want to see that what's possible, right?
Yeah.
It is possible.
Yeah.
But it takes work on an individual and collectively. Like, we can have an acrimonious relationship until our kids turn 18, and bludgeon one another, or we can have a cooperative and collaborative relationship because we do love our kids. And we want them, and obviously, right? I mean, we have choices every day. We have choices. We can change life every single day.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And for those people out there with exes and difficult toxic relationships, there are so many opportunities to change the dynamic. And I can also say in every high conflict relationship and high conflict case that takes years and years and years and years, both people are contributing. And
Yes.
usually my client thinks that they're perfect. But I can tell you every single time, if you have a case that is going on for years and years and years, you are contributing. You can make different choices. And I'm not saying it's easy. Maybe we need to all talk to Dr. Happiness. But okay, so I think that we didn't talk about the seventh thing, right?
The seventh thing has to do with be of service or be kind to others. Because first of all, happy people by nature, because their batteries are full, they do acts of service and kindness all the time, just naturally, automatically. On the flip side, I believe that when we perform acts of kindness and be of service to other people, something happens to us innately that makes us feel better about ourselves and for the other person too. So what's funny is, as I've done most of my last year and a half, all my speaking engagements are here on Zoom, and I've shared this message about kindness and service. 90% of the time it's accepted and embraced and so on. But I've had like a 10% population, even on live television, on radio, who have pushed back. Like, are you kidding me? I'm isolated. I'm like I've lost my job. I'm depressed. I have stress. I can't help anybody. I'm struggling. I'm drowning. What am I, my brother's keeper? This is an actual quote, by the way. So I lean into the camera. I'm like, no, you're not your brother's keeper. You're your mother's keeper and your sister's keeper and the neighbor's keeper and the homeless person down the street or someone 10,000 miles away in India. Because in the end, we're all connected and we're all brothers and sisters. And why I say that, because if you're listening to the sound of my voice, I guarantee you're better off than somebody else. I guarantee it. All you got to do is look around.
Mm-hmm.
So that takes care of 9 out of the 10%. Now about 99% compliance, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still that 1% that says, okay, I see what you're saying. I understand. Yes, I could definitely help, and all that stuff. But the 1% says, well, I'm quarantined. This is back in the day, right? Things have opened up a little bit, but I haven't left my apartment. I can't help anybody. And I'm like, that's not true either. You download and you get a prompting that I need to reach out to someone you care about. I need to reach out to Billy, see how she's doing. It doesn't cost me anything to get on a Zoom call or text you and say, Billy, how are you doing today?
Right.
What is the worst thing that you could possibly say to me? It's like, I'm doing fine. Why are you even texting me?
Right.
You wouldn't even say that. You say, thanks for thinking of me, right?
Right.
But more often than not, if you get a prompting to reach out to somebody else, there's a reason for it.
Yeah.
You won't know that reason until you actually connect with them, and then you'll see. And I've got myriads of examples as to how powerful that is. And that's an act of service, and that doesn't cost any money, right?
It's true. It's true. And it kind of goes to back to your forgiveness list. Like if you're thinking, I can't do anything, then maybe just start small and maybe it'll snowball.
And I'm glad that you said that I can't do three of the most common phrases that human beings use far too frequently, if you ask me, are the following. I can't do that. I can't afford this.
Yeah.
And this will never work out.
Yeah.
Right. These are the very common phrases. We all do. I've done it in my own head, right? The way to turn that on its head is to change the question. How can I do this?
Mm-hmm.
How could I afford that? How can I make this happen? Because just restating the question, what happens in our brains, now we're like towards solution focused. How can I? I don't know. But if you keep asking the question, you'll figure it out. If you say I can't, then you're done.
Right.
If you say, how can I? Then that opens the possibility that I could afford this somehow, or I can make this happen, right?
You can turn on some creativity.
Right. And these are simple adjustments or pivots. I mean, we're not talking about changing our whole personality here. I'm talking about being mindful of how you think, because your thoughts definitely lead to, the actions you take, for better or for worse.
We don't have a ton of time left, but I want to ask, for those of us who are parents, how can we influence our children's mindset, especially if we've got grumpy teens?
I think part of it is, and I claim that I've raised like 500 teenagers in my private practice over the years. I mean, literally. And I just love teenagers because, yeah, they can drive you crazy. I've raised my own, but also they can be so much fun if you find a way to connect with them. I mean, they're brilliant, right? I would say part of it is try not to ever shame them or embarrass them, or make them feel guilty. I mean, I know that happens often because when you do that, the kid will go underground, right? They'll pull back even more. Try to have those hot discussions with them, honest, open, and transparent, but do it from a place of love. And as a parent, I think I'll seek first to understand. I've done all kinds of assessments, myself included, with my wife and my kids. We found out afterwards, after they left the house, they were like, that I'm more of a personal thinker. Like I'm a person to person. I mean, I'm a relationship people. My wife is more practical.
Mm.
Our kids, turns out that we're both unconventional thinkers, meaning that they think outside of the box, like an Elon Musk or like a Steve Jobs, right? Completely outside of the unconventional. Well, until I did that assessment, I just thought that our kids were being ordinary. They're just being difficult. Because for years I'm like, honey, I don't know where they're coming from. I can't relate to what they're like. What are they thinking? It turns out that their brains actually, for our kids, I'm not saying all kids are like that, unconventional thinkers, they think totally different. And when I did the assessment of them and I figured it out, it's like, okay, now I'm understanding why sometimes we miss them, right? I wish I had that information early on to know what type of thinking, what is their thinking pattern? It's not the same as yours a lot of times, right?
So what I'm hearing is don't shame, don't embarrass, and then, lean in and listen and try to understand where they're coming from.
Yes, and have them take ownership, like rather than trying to control certain behavior, get good grades, study, do your homework, you're playing too many video games, all that stuff. Like share with them, because the minute they own something, that's when the magic happens. Because ultimately, you're not going to be like, I don't care if you're a helicopter parent. At some point, the helicopter is grounded.
Right.
As a parent, because our kids grow up and they take off. So we want to teach them to take personal responsibility for their lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
As much as we can. So it's a dance, of course. It depends on the age group too, right? But and also to empower them. And kids also need their parents to believe in them. meaning I believe that I know I know this is tough right now, but I believe you will overcome this. You have what it takes. That message from parents to kids needs to happen on a consistent basis. I'm here to help. I'm here to support, but I know what it takes. Let's put our minds together. We'll figure out the solution. I'm here for you. I got your back, but this is your life. So, what are you going to do with it?
Right.
Right.
Good stuff. I'm buying your book for sure. I know our audience is going to want the book. Like, I just am very grateful for this time that we spent together today. Thank you so much for being a guest.
You're welcome. And I would love to connect with your audience too. Find me on LinkedIn, Elia Gougouris, the happiness doctor, or Instagram or whatever. I mean, that's my social, that's where my platform. Or if you want to know more about what I do, go to dreliagougouris.com. That's my website, and you can find all the information right there. But yeah, I think the post-divorce, that's the excitement part, is to help your audience create their best year yet. In 90 minutes is very, very powerful.
And so let's take a minute to talk about that. So you do individual 90-minute sessions to help people with that? Is that how that works?
Yes.
Okay.
And on Zoom. I do it right here on Zoom.
Okay.
And it's an active, like they're actually doing the work during those 90 as we speak. Like I ask questions and they write things down.
Okay. Well, I'm doing it. I'm gonna sign up 100%.
I mean, if you experience, I'm telling you, I've been doing this because I got certified back in 2008. I do this every year for myself between Christmas and New Year's. My wife does it. My kids do it. I do it with all my clients. And you can also do it for teams. Like you can also do it for, like, not just individual, but you can do it for teams or departments or even entire like organizations and companies. There's some variations that are a little different, obviously, from the individual one, but for the main course is pretty much the same.
Okay. I love it. We're going to be talking a lot more. Thank you so much for your time today. Have a great day.
You too. Enjoy.